criminal way. Yes, killing somebody and eating them is perfectly innocent.
Well, in the way that they did it, like you've all stated.
I don't think that's the best argument. What would you say?
That like retribution in like normal society is different than retribution like on a ship as sailors. So there's like a difference.
All right, you can try to do an end run around retribution because they were not in Southampton, right? They were not in the country. They were in a state of nature, essentially. So there's no crime that the law really applies to. I think that the sort of general conceptual idea you want to keep in mind is sometimes you just have to argue against application of the principle. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? If you're going to make retribution a major factor, then we lose. So don't make retribution a major factor. Let it be outweighed by rehabilitation. Let it be outweighed by specific deterrence. Right? So sometimes your best argument on a point is going to be, yes, that may be on that issue, but that principle should be a minor one or even discarded entirely. So don't forget that in your calculus of possible arguments. One of your arguments can always be that should simply not be a major factor, because you might be in implicitly conceding that it's a tough issue for you, but sometimes it might be your best thing.
Could you also argue too, because when the men are debating who should die out of all of them, one of the points that they bring up is that the rest of the men have families back at home. Parker does not. So could you argue that maybe they weren't necessarily looking out only for their best interest, but they were also looking out for kind of the best interest of their families and of their children, saying,
yeah, as a single man with no dependents, I'm going to just go ahead and reject that. Okay? All right. I want to spend the next few minutes talking about the Burns hypo on your syllabus. So pull it out or pull it up. And this was an actual exam question. So for those of you who are fretting about the exam or want to get some early guidance on what exam questions look like or how they are framed, what I did was I asked the students, this is on the 2007 exam for what it's worth, so I had to update a couple of things here, like the governors of the states. I asked them to write a memo that they were an aide to Governor Brown, and they had to write a memo taking a position one way or the other as to whether to seek extradition of Burns, and to do so based on whether doing so would serve the purposes of the criminal justice system. So I hope that will show you how a question can be framed that asks you to show your knowledge of and ability to argue from the purposes. I can guarantee you right now, very few things are guaranteed in life, but I can guarantee you as I stand here right now that one of the questions on your exam will ask you, at least in substantial part, to focus on whether a certain action, whether that's bringing a prosecution, a sentencing, legislation, some action would or would not serve the purposes of the criminal justice system. And I do it in ways like giving you this Burns hypo. Set up a situation and then let you argue by writing something a lawyer would write whether it would serve the purposes. So I want to spend the next few minutes discussing this, and then you will have 1 week, that is 1 week from today, bring it to class or email it to me by class time a week from today, next Wednesday, a Burns memo. This will be your first optional assignment that will count for class participation. You'll get feedback from me. It will not in any way be graded, so don't worry about it. It is to give you feedback and to show you where you stand in terms of incorporating your understanding of the purposes and be able to apply them in building an argument, right? So a good faith effort is all you need to do. Maximum of 3 pages. God knows I do not need to read 10 pages on Burns. I have read many Burns memos in my time. 3 pages is your maximum. Okay? So it can be quick and simple. Everyone got the assignment?
A week from today.
A week from today.
So that Wednesday?
That's Wednesday, a week from today. Yeah, Wednesday the 15th, yeah, the 22nd. So again, at the beginning of class, so either bring it with you to class or email it to me. If I haven't got it by the beginning of class, I might still look at it if I have time, give you some feedback, but it won't count for the class participation bucket. Okay? All right. So you've read the Burns hypo, either taking the view that he should be extradited or that he shouldn't, and framing it in, let's say you're around the table with the governor, and you know there's somebody else at the table who wrote a memo on the other side. So keeping that in mind, what are you going to say when the governor says, okay, we'll open the floor for arguments about whether we should give in to Governor Kitzhaber and not extradite him, or that we should? Give me one. Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry, there was a lot there. We're giving a U.S. for an argument on why he should not be?
Or that he should be.
Or
You
that
can
he
pick.
should be.
Right.
Okay.
And when you do your memos, you can pick which side.
Okay. So then, against extradition.
Against extradition, okay?
Would be the utilitarianism side of the criminal justice system.
Which? Yeah, I want you to dig it a little more specific and not just sort of say, because if you're going to make the case that every utilitarian argument weighs in favor of not extraditing, I think you're bitten off more than you want to chew.
Yeah.
Okay? So give me more specifically one of the utilitarian arguments, or use retribution if you want.
Specific deterrence would be it to argue not extraditing him.
Articulate that.
Because you're at his age and given his health and everything else, you don't really feel like he's going to do this again. So there's not a need to deter him from.
At his age and his health, anything else into building in that
And they
argument?
said that they thought he had been rehabilitated by the way he was living his life. The governor had.
And for a long time?
Yeah, had weighed in on it.
So those arguments intertwine, don't they? Mm-hmm. And one way you can do that in the memo is to say the circumstances since his release from prison in Oregon suggest that neither the goal of specific deterrence nor rehabilitation would be served because he doesn't need to be deterred given that Burns has already shown an exemplary life that shows the virtues of rehabilitation, and articulate that based on, and use the facts to build that argument. Okay? So that's a really good argument for Burns. Both no need for specific deterrence resulting from his absolutely overwhelming evidence of his rehabilitation. Okay? Now, before I get anything else for the moment, if you hear that argument on the other side, either you know it's going to come because you anticipate it, or you're in this conference room with the governor and you're on the side of extraditing him, how are you going to respond to that argument without just sort of changing the subject? Or do you just change the subject?
Well, I think that there is a social utility argument to be made for the extradition based on
specific deterrence and rehabilitation?
Based on fostering cooperation between the state governments and the law enforcement.
Yeah, I would give you a C.
Okay, but
You want a C?
no, I don't.
Okay.
But
what did I ask you to focus on? I asked you to focus on the purposes of punishment that we talked about in class. Did I talk about federalism? Did I talk about cooperation between the states? No. Keep your eye on the prize, right, as the old saying goes. Focus on what I ask you to focus on. If you want to throw that in, like at the end as a bonus, do it after you've shown me you can focus on the things I want you to focus on. I think because that can be good, but it's not going to get you the meat and potatoes where you want to go.
in the interest of focusing on what you just asked me to focus on.
Good.
That statement also, if that is true, that the rehabilitation is evident and complete,
Yep.
then allowing California to see that through their legal process
Okay.
should be a slam dunk, should be a no-brainer that they would see. And it's mentioned in the exercise that California's already mentioned that as a possibility, that they would consider time served and parole him immediately.
Right, but it should be our decision. That's a great point, right? What you want, because that's a tough issue for any side that is favoring extradition. But look, he's been like a wonderful citizen, a contributing member of society, but you can say it's up to us to decide. And that's how you deal with a tough issue for you. You deal with a tough issue not by necessarily trying to pretend it's not a tough issue, but by finessing it. Maybe you, I said with the Dudley and Stevens, you say, okay, we acknowledge he's being rehabilitated, but that shouldn't be the highest priority. And here's why other points, other factors should be more important in your decision, Governor. Or you say, you can take that into account, but take it into account at the right time after we have him. And I don't deny we should take that into account, but in the right way for the right reasons. Okay? Very good. Okay? Other points you might use. Yeah.
Obviously, he should be extradited.
Based on?
Retribution.
Based on retribution. Give me that.
33-year-old police officer who was killed and he was part of the commission of the killing. And then the other thing is that...
And he's never paid the price.
He's never paid the price.
What's the other side going to come back with? You want to anticipate the other side's possible counter-arguments to you. What is the other side likely to come back with when you say retribution?
They're going to say he's paid his debt to society.
And good. That is what they might say, and they have fallen into a trap if they say that. Why is that a trap?
He hasn't paid his debt to society for this crime. He's paid it for something else.
Exactly. That's a really good argument for those who would urge the governor to extradite Burns. It's like, he has not paid his debt. At most, he paid his debt to Oregon, and he's paid a fraction of his debt to California. And so one of the things you want to avoid if you're on the other side is falling into that trap. Instead, you might come up with other arguments against retribution or giving retribution a lot of weight in the decision. Okay, so that's what I want you to do in these memos, is make your affirmative arguments and try to anticipate counter-arguments and argue against them, respond to them as affirmatively as you can. Okay? Using this as sort of a guide to how I want you to do it. And then I will put, after next Wednesday, I will put up on Blackboard a model answer. That'll be in addition to the comments I give you specifically on your answers. So you'll see how I want you to start writing these memos. And that'll give you your first introduction to the way you might want to start structuring answers and write them in the way I think is appropriate. Yeah.
I was gonna say that he should be extradited
For
for general deterrence.
general deterrence. Okay? I'm gonna ask, since we're at the end of time, I'm going to ask you to save that for your memo. Okay? But that's a really good argument for the state, for the idea of extraditing. General deterrence is a really good argument for extraditing. Okay? Good job. And this is criminal law concerns. You are done with your first